feeling fine. A pretty miss gave it back, and so I'm feeling fine. And so on. Very fast, very frenetic.
See why I didn't make it, eh?
Yeah. We did it on the Old Boy show, I think, didn't we?
Yeah, oh boy, yeah.
And
wiggling our legs.
nothing happened to it, you know. It didn't get much promotion, didn't go. The next one was an instrumental called Driftin', and actually it was Jet Black was the A-side, that Jet Harris wrote.
And Driftin', which
I wrote, yeah. They were both very derivative, sort of Dwayne Eddy type things, you know.
And then Saturday Dance was the third single, vocal group,
which
Hank wrote. And Saturday Dance nearly made it. It nearly made the top 30, I think, in those days. So that'd still be late 59.
Yeah. And then that gave us a lot of confidence, I think, that encouragement that it was almost a hit.
Also the first single with the Strat on.
Yeah.
Cliff and ourselves and Hank, we were really into America, you know, Buddy Holly and the Blue Cat, Gene Vincent and Ricky Nelson especially, his guitar player. And obviously they played America. Their records sounded great, and the solo and the lead guitars always sounded great. And we didn't know his name at the time. We loved Ricky Nelson's guitarist, who is now James Burton, of course, or was then as well.
Yeah.
And we'd seen Buddy Holly. We'd seen the photograph of Buddy with this guitar that looked like a spaceship. You know, we just didn't know what it was. And so Cliff, big star, he said, he sent to America, to California, to the Fender factory. We found out it was a Fender for the brochure, and the brochure came back. You know, I always love. Mark Knopfler says he saw the brochure as well. He can remember the smell of the brochure. It was just, you know, because it was that important in those days. And we were flicking through. You know, we went through the little brochure, and there was a Broadway or whatever it was, and a Telecaster, and then it came to the centre page, and there was this pink Stratocaster with a maple neck, with gold-plated hardware, you know, and it was, wow. And to cut a long story short, Cliff bought it. He imported this guitar, Fender Stratocaster, for Hank to play.
Yeah, the funny thing was, and it worked out really well, that first of all, this guitar, this Strat, we could see it was the same shape as the one Buddy Holly had, so we thought, well, that's the same one. And surely James Burton uses the same guitar, because it's the most expensive one in the range. So anyway, when this thing arrived with this tremolo arm on, it had the heaviest strings you could imagine on there. Couldn't bend them. They're like horses, you know, steel horses. And I thought, particularly James Burton used to bend around a lot. Great stuff. And I genuinely thought that it must be the American diet, you know, with all this steak and eggs and milk. These guys must have incredibly powerful fingers, you see, that can bend these strings. And I genuinely believed that, because none of us had heard of light gauge strings in those days. They didn't exist in the UK. So, and it wasn't until, a couple of years later, we found out that, in fact, he didn't use a Strat anyway. He used a Telly with extremely light strings on. But I'm glad in a way that we got the Stratocaster, because from my standpoint, that was a huge component in developing the style.
Yeah, your trademark.
The tremolo arm, and developing a sort of vibrato using that, because you couldn't do it on the heavy strings, and no one was doing vibratos then anyway.
This guitar was 140 guineas. 140 guineas. A bargain.
At 1959, Bruce, in Leeds, doing a week in variety at Leeds, and we were sitting down after a show considering how we could improve the presentation.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, Bruce, myself, and Cliff, unbeknown to us, had gone to see Jerry Lee Lewis in the Savoy, Burnt Oak, I think it was, with a backing, not his backing band, a support band called the Treniers, black band, Fender bass, sax player, keyboard, a couple of vocalists. And the interesting thing was that this R&B band used to do all these great movements together. And we got to think about that and thought, well, why can't we do something like that? So we thought, okay. And we were putting a new number in that week. It was called Willie and the Hand Jive. And Cliff was on the centre mic. We'd come either side, do the little interjections and the harmonies. And then the harmonies. And then came the solo. And we worked this routine out where we all walked back in unison and started walking sort of diagonally, a kick, back, front, kick, and etc. during the solo.
The Tiller Girls.
And I tell you what, we worked this thing out, and it was quite difficult to play and do all this at once, but we stuck it in the show, and it brought the house down. And we thought, hey, this has got to be the direction. So we gradually added more and more stuff to it.
I mean, obviously Cliff had all the adulation. He was the star, if you like. We were just having so much fun, weren't we? The concerts were a riot. We used to purposely make him wiggle his legs a bit more so we could have a riot, you know. Yeah. And he was doing all the... And you couldn't hear him anyway. It was like... This is, you know, years before Beatlemania. You know, it was Cliff Mania or Tommy Steele Mania before that. You know, the girls just screamed, and we used to wiggle our legs, and I used to lay on my back during a solo and play rhythm on, and then I'd say to Hank, "Can you play rhythm while I get up?" I couldn't get up and play rhythm at the same time. Yeah. Ridiculous.
It was a pretty chaotic sort of presentation through that period, wasn't it? Every man for himself. If there was a piano there, you'd climb on it, you know. And Jet Harris would move to the front of the stage and glare at all the guys and look for the, you know, things like that. It was a very weird thing. But I think one thing that helped us, certainly probably from 59 onwards, was that we had older people around us, like Sid Morris, from the Grades organisation, who were then Cliff's agent. Very experienced tour manager, worked with a lot of big names, both British and American, and therefore not impressed by a few guys who've got girls screaming at them. And people like that around you are very good for keeping you on your feet. I remember Bruce one time saying to David Bryce, something like, you remember you said, "Listen, man, I'm a star." And David said, "Well, twinkle, twinkle."
Yeah, I was 17 then.
Yeah, and it's great, you see, because that kind of... And then in 1960, we got a manager for the Shads. So as things moved forward, we always had people around us who were older, more experienced, and kept us in check, and kept us really
on the
feet on the floor.
Yeah, yeah.
Jerry Lorden.
We met Jerry on this tour in April of 1960.
He came up to Jet and myself after one show and said, are you guys going to do any more recordings? And we said, well, yes, we're due to record when we finish this tour. He said, what are you going to do, instrumentals or vocals? We said, well, we don't really know. We're going to try to write something. Doesn't really matter, whatever comes easiest. And he said, well, can I play you an instrumental that I've written? And we said, yeah. And he, out of a small bag, he produced this little ukulele. And he went jink diddling, jink 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 diddling diddling, down 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 diddling, and so on.
And he said, no, Jim, we don't like it.
And enthralled with this piece. And we thought, this is very classy, simple but classy instrumental. So we got Bruce and Tony, listened to it, yeah, played it to Norrie Paramore, he loved it. We arranged it before we did that, because there's no arrangement, it's just a straight tune.
Norrie had already earmarked our next single, which was the old Army song. Quartermasters. I'm never sure whether it's Quartermasters. It is Quartermasters.
We called it, I thought we called it Quatermasters at the time.
Yeah, but it was Quartermasters, you know, as in the army.
Yeah.
And so we took it to Norrie, and he said, okay, but I want you to do Quartermaster Stores. And we recorded both the tunes, and of course Apache was quite unique then with the Echo Box and all that stuff. And it was just a great melody. And Norrie was quite keen on Quartermaster Stores being the A-side. And we sort of said, oh. And we'd heard this story that Norrie, when he made Move It with Cliff, Schoolboy Crush was going to be the A-side. And Move It was obviously fantastic. And Norrie said, he said this to Cliff, he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take it home to my daughters and play it to them. And the daughters chose Move It. And he said the same thing with us. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take it home and play it to my girls. And the girls chose Apache. And he said, okay.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
You know, obviously we had the number one. Lots lots of people in those days did pantomimes. It was quite common. We did Cliff&Shads in 1959. 60 did 3 weeks in pantomime in Stockton and Hull. Yours did 2 weeks in Stockton and a week in Hull. We did it ourselves in 1961, I think, end of 61. Same thing. And the only other pantomimes we did were the ones at the Palladium. We wrote the music for 3.
And appeared in 2.
The first one Cliff and ourselves were in, which was Aladdin. Was it Aladdin?
Yeah.
Then Frank Ifield did Babes in the Wood. We wrote the music for that, all original music. Then we did the third in the series, which was what? Cinderella.
Yeah. But the Palladium was the most famous theatre in the world, and probably still is. And we would do 16 weeks at a stretch there. But more important, we wrote the scores. So in 1964 and 66 and 65 for Frank Ifield, that was a big deal to do that.